Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jared Capel, and I'm here with special guest Kenji Matsumoto.
Hello, everybody.
Both sets in round three are 4 games to 2, with Mack leading Noah and Josh leading Sid. We'll be sticking with the Mack and Noah game as it's deciding the $600 first place prize.
So this is the first time we've had not duplicated caricatures on the top of the screen.
It's about time.
Actually, it's not the first time. The first 6 games, I guess, Joey and me were doing this until Joey became Joey again.
Yeah, well, Kenji, you look so animated in that picture.
Yeah, that's much more animated than I actually am in real life. Don't get your hopes up.
Well, I'm smiling in that picture, so that's also a bit of a lie.
Okay, fair enough.
Two commentators and a full group of chat churro. And hello, Elderward. We didn't see you this morning. Nice to see you joining the party.
Hello, everybody. Did you end up watching any of the Worlds? I'm just curious.
No, I
Okay,
try and stay away from Collins coverage because it
good.
confuses me. I've a hard enough time with NWL as watching my commentary will show you. Um, so I didn't see any of it, and I missed basically all of the Saturday of this event, but I saw
Okay,
some of the Friday night.
all right, cool. I
Um,
did not watch this morning at all. I was sleeping.
no, well, that's fair. Because you commentated Friday and Saturday, right?
Yeah,
Hardcore. I hope he's paying you enough.
yeah, he's playing me. He's definitely sufficiently paying me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're gonna begin, and it looks like Mac is drawing first.
I still can't get over that picture uh on Mack's side. I just that's just the weirdest.
It does look like you're beating me 4 games to 2 instead of Mac beating Noah 4 games to 2.
Yeah, it does. That is a bit of an issue.
Something to continue to
Something to
work
work
on
on.
going forward.
Yeah, maybe put the scores on the future next to their names on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Oh, look, we have a new subscriber. Thank you, Move11, and welcome to the chat.
thanks, Move 11.
So Mac's first rack is dollar with an N. It looks like he's going to play that word dollar. Looks good to me. What do you think, Kenji?
Yeah, looks at least all right. Bit aggressive, but nothing wrong with being a bit aggressive. We're
A
gonna see
bit
Martagon go
longer,
down.
a bit longer than maybe some players would play there, but I
Well, the letters aren't very good. Like the only good letter in
exactly
that entire rack is an R.
right. Yeah, there's nothing really you can play short and leave a nice leave. So I do like that play. As we'll see, Noah quickly get the first bingo of the game down.
Yep,
You know what a Martagon is?
of course not.
No, me neither.
Nor
Let's
do I
find
know what a
out.
trangam is. I know what a tangram is though.
It's a kind of lily.
Okay.
Okay. The games move fast when they have bingos, and we see Mac drawing into the first blank of the game. Soundly would be the first word that comes to mind for me.
Yep. A bunch of other bingos that are similar to that, but I don't see any reason to not play soundly. When you're looking with racks like this, generally you're looking for okay, you have a root, you have a base minimum. Okay, soundly and Dolores. Okay, and then you're probably going to be looking for I don't know something that scores a little bit better, and you're only looking. So basically, I stopped looking in that spot because with Dolores, it's going to be the best bingo by far. And then you're just looking at Martagon's bingos, and then maybe bingos to the R or the M, maybe the A, maybe and that's kind of it. Like those are the only spots that are even
The other
theoretically
thing, I
better.
guess, would be a bingo from the U in Delore to the triple, but he already has a U, like an unword. But with his
Yeah,
duplicate U, that's not going to work.
I mean unsourly,
Exactly.
but
Something like
yeah,
that would score a lot because you're tripling the play. But I think he's going to see Soundly pretty quick. I have entered it into Quackle. It's the only option. So his only choice, assuming he finds Soundly, is to play it with Dollar or Martagon.
yeah.
The wide triples with Dollar, which is why it's worth a touch more. 2 more points.
We're likely to see some sort of like exhaustion if some, and here comes Soundly.
Yeah.
Just because if you look at this stage already, like there's been 3 plays and basically the entire board is hopelessly open. So what's going to end up happening is that we're going to get into a situation where the board will always be open
Right.
until there's no more lanes, until all the lanes have basically been used. So we're going to have one of these games for the next, I want to say, I don't know, 6 or 7 turns on both sides are going to be open, and there's going to be like lots of space to bingos. And after that, there just won't be a place to put 7 letters on the board anymore, in all likelihood.
Exactly. So we're going to see a lot of action in this middle part of the game, and it makes sense because if you were to look to try and close this board, you wouldn't even know where to begin. There's just so many tiles you could bingo through, the A, R, T, M of Martagon, or through those letters in Soundly, Doleurs, from the D, and Doleurs again.
Right.
So looking to Noah's rack, he has 2 I's and 3 clunky tiles in the F, M, and B. So I think we're going to see him try and get rid of at least 2 of those clunkier tiles,
right,
as well as one of the duplicate I's.
I would assume Fibrin, most likely.
Okay.
Sets up your S, gets rid of the F, I, and B, which are probably your 3 worst tiles here.
I agree. That would be a very nice play. He does have one of the S's. There will be 2 more in the bag. Instead, he's going to burn his S, which doesn't look ideal.
Interesting. Not really sure why that would be good, I guess. I mean, it does block the double-double, I guess, and you have an N, so that double-double's pretty bad for you, but I still think that Fibrin is a better play than that, personally.
Yeah, I agree. I would have went with Fibrin had I found it, but that is what he elected to play, and Mack will quickly take the highest scoring play available with Juke. Not much to consider there. Let me start updating these scores. If you see I'm forgetting, just let me know, anybody. It's 149 to 101 in Mack's favor early on.
Yeah, we had to update the scores manually, so it is a bit, it's easy not to, I fell behind all the time when I was doing this.
Yeah, I think I've been doing better than I expected, but it would be nice if there was an easier way to get this done.
Yeah, for sure.
And I am agreeing with Jackson that just fib would have been fine. I don't see any reason that he'd be wanting to burn that S. If he had 2 S's, it would have been different, but in that situation, just leaving MINS would have been totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, MINS, these aren't the best floaters for MINS, just because the floaters are like the N and the L are probably the best floaters, and those don't work very well, but that still would have been fine. Like, yeah, it still would have been okay, at least.
So looking over to Noah's rack of Holomin, and he's bingoing with this. Holonium, is that a word?
I highly doubt it.
Yeah, polonium would be like an element on the table.
Helenium would.
Helenium.
That's probably, and polonium is probably.
And polonium, right. But I've never seen this word. No, it's not good. And Mack has challenged it.
Yeah.
Quite quickly.
Holmium as well is a word.
Right.
So Mack is going to have full information of Noah's rack. He's going to know that like Ohm is a threat that Noah has. He might be willing to block it and sacrifice a little bit to do so.
He also could just play Vex parallel to Fib and score quite a lot.
Yeah, he could.
And also there's that X spot beneath Martagon's. He'd be leaving VECCT, but he could play X there, I guess, for 52.
Right, so he's going to be looking and through those are his options, and those are the things he's going to be considering. Blocks for Ohm really aren't that great. Like, he has stuff like, what does he even have that blocks?
Yeah.
I don't think he has anything good.
No, and I don't think it's that important to block there when he can also score with the X. The problem is he doesn't want to get stuck with too many clunkers for too long.
Well, it's kind of important because like Ohm is the best play probably by what?
Yeah,
15
probably by
points?
15, yeah.
Like, so you're basically, if you have a 25-point play there, you're gonna play it. Like,
I mean, he doesn't though.
yeah, he has to he has to sacrifice more than that even. Like, that's the
Right.
problem.
Like Noah could play OH, I guess, beneath Mardigons if Mack doesn't block there.
That's a lot worse.
Yeah, no, it is. He will just take the points over dropping the V as well next to Fibs. The points looks reasonable with his lead.
Yeah, he's gonna get Civet next turn, like guaranteed, because he knows Noah's not going to play there. So that's probably part of the reason why he thought that was okay. Because even though he has duplicate Cs, he has a pretty much guaranteed spot for them.
Yeah, that's a really good analysis. And that's what's so important about challenging off that bingo. You get the knowledge of your opponent's rack. He's going to play Moho, not Ohm. So that scores even more. That didn't come into either of our minds, but it's definitely looking like the right play.
Yeah, I mean, the O is actually pretty good here, but it's probably still worth the points to take Moho.
Yeah, because it's scoring 13 more by my, or no, 9 more, I believe. I've updated the score. It's 201 to 142.
So Mack's gonna probably just play Civet here. He's not really all that concerned with blocking the N and L because he knows Noah has an N and an L. So that's not going to be high on his priority list. He's just trying to clear stuff. He doesn't have much. This is a pretty bad rack.
Yeah, no, having the spot to play Civet is so helpful for him to clear off 2 of those 4 clunkers that he has.
Right. In other situations, you might consider Cleft to the L and Soundly, but because of the fact that he knows what Noah has, that just doesn't even become a consideration anymore.
I see a food on Noah's rack, a Jewish dumpling. That's a 7-letter word. But I don't see where it would play. Does he have a bingo here?
I don't think so.
Land-like?
I don't think
Not a word? I think I would have been tempted to try land-like.
I mean, it's possible I'm wrong.
No, it is not good. Your instincts were right on that one. Knaidel is the Jewish dumpling, Knaidel. Jackson's pointed out Sikkim last term that we didn't consider.
Yeah, but that's just such a big point sacrifice.
Oh, he is going to try land-like, so
okay.
He would have gotten it by me. Is he going to get it by Mr. Meller? You can see Max smile. I don't think this one's staying on the board either. And Sid's leaning over, trying to get a peek at what word was played.
Part of the incentive to playing those letters off is if you didn't want to do this, you probably do want to get rid of your L and N, not because it's that bad, but because Mack knows that you have them.
Right.
And, in this case, if it does come off, Mack is going to just leave the N, D, L, and Soundly again because he knows it's bad for Noah.
Right.
Especially since he's going to focus on blocking probably the Civet overlap.
That is the easiest spot to score on this board.
Well, and just stuff like Link and Dink, which are just a lot better than his secondary options. Mack is thinking about it. You can tell he's not as sure as I was.
Right. I would have challenged the last one pretty quickly too. This one, I think I would have looked at and left. He knows the words a lot better than most players, and my guess is he doesn't like it, but he knows if he's to lose this challenge, the points of the bingo are going to make it essentially a tie and then go to Noah's turn. So it's a very key decision here.
Right. I mean, Mack's next play is obvious pretty much either way here.
Right.
So he's not like there's nothing he has to think about in terms of blocking just because of his rack. He's playing Koth every single time.
Right. Yeah, he has to get rid of that Q.
Right, and there's P and H are not great tiles either, and it's 31
right, and points. It scores nicely because both the Q and the P will double.
Right, so he's not really thinking too much about considerations because he knows what the sequence is either way.
Right. And even if he loses this challenge, that O is likely to stay open just because there are better spots on the board.
I mean, it's likely, but it's not definite.
It's
Like,
not a guarantee, no.
I mean, particularly the EX underlap, like that blocking it is particularly not unlikely.
It could happen, yeah. He does challenge, so good for him for pulling the challenge gun twice in this game. And Noah is gonna have to pull that one off the board.
I mean, land-like, if you think of it in terms of air-like as a word and sea-like as a word,
Right.
then land-like seems like it might be a word.
It's totally reasonable. Like, it just, I
And
looked at those
sand-like is a word
tiles,
too.
I found the like ending, and I just thought it would have been good.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's based mostly on familiarity. Oh, there's no sea-like, yeah. Is there ocean-like?
Ocean Lake's a 9, so I wouldn't know that one. Seal like, as Jackson points out. That's a very different.
No ocean-like either. So Mack's gonna play cough. Mack's gonna make sure that there's no bingo first, and then he's gonna play cough.
Right, exactly. He has lined it up.
Cough does give Noah alkyne, actually, so that might be some consideration. You can think about actually making some other play and leaving cough because of that, because you know Noah is not going to play there ever, just so that you don't leave alkyne. So that might also be a consideration. You might consider.
It looks like he's considering Fletch, which scores very nicely. Wouldn't give back alkyne at least, but would it be giving any other bingo? He'd be hanging a T, a C, and an H. Hand like, but the H would be in a totally different spot.
Yeah, he does have to keep the Q to do that, however, which is
right. There are two U's, but they wouldn't be the sort of spot on the board where the U would really score much.
I think that he might not even see cough. Cough is not the easiest word to see.
It's a word I miss often too, but he did have it lined up at one point, so I do think he did see it. I saw the QPH on the right side of his rack. But I think he's picked up the tiles for Fletch. And it does come down, so he is leaving QP. We'll see how that plays out for him.
Newt, haven't you played free challenge for most of your life, actually? Because 5-point challenge is not that old. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Okay, so we've seen this rack from Noah before. When you've had 2 words challenged off the board, you start to get this mindset where you're not sure if anything is valid. Noah's been around the game a long time, so hopefully he won't fall prey to such feelings, but it is the sort of thing I'd be thinking of after having lost 2 challenges.
I don't think he's too concerned about that.
Yeah, I don't think it's Noah's style either, but I think a lot of other players could get rattled in that sort of situation.
Yeah, for sure. It can happen, but at the same point, when you're playing a set, like if you've lost that degree of challenge, you're gonna lose the set. Like you have to figure it out. He does find coughs immediately. So good for him.
So if he missed it the first time, which I don't think he did, like I said, I saw him have it lined up. It seemed like more of a purposeful decision, and it paid off in spades for him here.
Yeah.
He's taken a very powerful lead, 341 to 178. And Noah, having lost 2 challenges, is finding himself in a very difficult situation.
Yeah. Ideally,
go ahead.
Ideally, in these sorts of situations, you want to be looking. You might even be thinking about leaving the K open just because.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, because he might need that triple to get back into this one.
Maybe weekly might just be too strong. However,
it scores a lot. It would be nice if you could play beneath coughs with underlapping the I and opening lane to the left, but I don't see a way he can do that well.
Levy, but that's just too painful. The lead is just too awful. Um, the, I mean, WAY is just those are just like terrible being. Those are terrible tiles for Noah at this score. They'd be great tiles for Mack. Mack would gladly take them if they could actually. Each
Right.
of them could reverse their racks right now. They would do so. Noah would
Yeah.
much rather have Mack's rack, and Mack would much rather have Noah's rack.
What Kenji's trying to say is that Noah being down, he really wants these bingo tiles and able to try and get back in this game, whereas Mac would be totally fine with the lead, having the predictability of high scoring tiles to be able to score about 20, 30, 40 points a turn and just keep his lead.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't see you getting away from weekly here. It's
yeah, it does score way more than the other options. Looking into Quackle, weekly scores 48. The next best would be Wally uh, at the bottom, WALIE, but it leaves VY.
so he's
And
fishing for Valkyrie,
okay.
which I don't recommend. Is there
There
anything
are
else he can
four
hit
R's
even?
unseen. One is on Max Rack, but no, it doesn't know that.
Yeah, I would need other outs. Like,
I think the problem is after an exchange of one, I can't see Mac leaving the triple lane open, like ever.
I mean, I could, but only if he bingos and
Right, and then the triple isn't enough to get him back in the game anyways.
right.
He didn't draw the R he would have needed for Valkyrie. And by the way, we did see Valkyr come onto the board earlier today.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so Noah is like here he could play something like Avid, which would open that new lane and score a bit. But
I
at
would be
this
resigning at this point.
exactly, that's what I was thinking. At this score, anything he's doing is just to play it out. Really, there's no chance of coming back.
Yeah. Even if he opens a triple and hits it, he's still losing
Right. So there
substantially.
is Avid.
Mac draws the second blank and is going to bingo. Um,
Uh, and just for people wondering, he could have played a word like valid, but you wouldn't want to do that because the V wouldn't allow you to put a tile above it in order to open a lane across that 14 row.
yeah.
Um, and Mac has baby bingos, as we would call them, which is very high probability bingos. There's many that he could pick from. Maybe in the chat, if you're a bit newer to the game, see if you can unscramble those letters into something that would be a valid word. No problem, Chess Bunzo. I'm trying to make sure that the commentary is suited not just to top level players, but also to people who might be a bit newer to the game. And if you have any questions, just post it to the chat and either Kenji or I will make sure to answer. And so he's going to go with anisette, which I believe is licorice flavored liquor. Is that right?
I mean, they're anises, so that would make sense. Aniseed and anise
Yeah.
is.
A cordial, yeah. So I am right about the definition this time.
I don't know what anything means, guys. Ask Jared what things mean.
Well, we know what the score means, and the score means that Mac is going to be one game away from winning the entire tournament.
Yep.
But Mac can come back. Scrabble can be a very streaky game. Sometimes you'll find you'll beat the same person 4 games in a row, and then they'll beat you 4 games in a row.
Oh, so, yeah, there's a lot of variance for sure.
Yeah. So just being
but not
down,
in this game.
Yeah. But being down 5-2 in a set when players are so evenly matched is not the end by any means.
Yeah, I mean, at this level, most people know what the matchups are, and so usually when you're playing a set, at least when I'm playing a set against the same person this repeatedly, you're usually looking for patterns and like trying to adapt at least a little bit. But but just because you find some way to adapt that you think is successful doesn't mean it's going to work. When you're trying to look for adaptations, you're trying to look for ways to win sets like these, 60-40, You're not
Right.
trying to win games. You can't win at Scrabble 80 or 90% of the time. It's just not going to happen at this
Mhm.
level.
No, even the computer couldn't beat these players at that level. So it's not going to happen. And the other thing is, these players know each other quite well. So trying to find an edge, like as you're playing the set, you might pick up on a couple of things, but going into the set, they already had a lot of this information.
Did they?
You don't think so?
I mean, maybe you know more than I do. I don't think that these players know each other that well at all. Like,
I
I
mean,
can't. I
they
mean,
wouldn't have played a lot live, maybe, but maybe online, maybe over the years, maybe having just observed each other's annotated games, having observed each other's online
maybe,
games.
but I don't think that Mack does a lot of annotated game analysis, and I don't think that Mack plays that much online. So I think that the amount of information they probably have on each other isn't that high.
Okay,
Uh,
that's fair.
I mean, they certainly know each other. Like they certainly probably have seen each other play before. But
Yeah, no, it won't be brand new, but that's true. Having played directly across the board, especially when you play so many in a row, you're going to pick up a lot more than if you just were to play one or two games here and there.
right, but as opposed to let's say Josh and any of these players, like Josh has played all these players many times, but I don't think Noah and Mac have necessarily. I think they probably played each other less than 5 times and maybe a few times online. But online, you're not really looking. You're just kind of playing online. You're not looking for adaptations because there's nothing really at stake when you're playing online.
Right, it
So
is quite different.
yeah,
We saw Matt come down with another bingo, this time the word dialoguer, which is dialogue taking the R, a very strange word that I wouldn't normally think of as a word, but it does count. And Mac draws the Z and an S and continues to run away with this one. I think he's been averaging probably close to 500 points a game this set.
yeah. I mean, Noah's not exactly the most defensive player either, so that does make some sense. They're. I imagine both players are perfectly content playing open boards like these, where, as you can see, like every single quadrant is very well covered at this point.
Right.
Only two triples have been played, which is kind of unusual. But uh, you can't even bingo now on this board. As I was saying at the beginning of the game, you could barely bingo this board if you tried. Like
Right.
there's nowhere to play. Like where are you
Yeah.
gonna put 7 tiles in a row on this board? Starting with
I
the
guess
W,
through the R of dialogue or down from the W of wedgie, but those are pretty marginal lanes.
right? And both of those barely have 8 spots. You have to start with W, or the R has to be in the 4th spot, and it has the
Exactly.
last letter is hook an A. Like these are terrible lines,
We
and
saw
DB
a
could be blocked.
yeah, we saw a combined score of over 1,000 on the first day of the game, and then the third day game of the day was exactly 1,000 of a combined score. So they have definitely been racking up the points. That's a nice play, going between two disconnected tiles. The word Byzance.
It's also Byzance for those of you who are curious.
And Noah is not wasting time on this turn. We've seen them play a bit more like trying to think out positions when the games are over earlier, but Noah just doesn't seem to care as much in this one. He knows it's over.
Yeah. Next gonna
Whereas
blow
this
out.
morning I saw him thinking through for 5 minutes on turns like that.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to my commentary, I have been razzing the players about this consistently about how like, oh well, the game's over now. Then there's 8 minutes on the clock. You just want to sit here for 7 minutes and watch them
Right.
think
In a
about how to.
tournament like this, where spread doesn't really matter, it doesn't seem like the best use of brain power to me. But to each their own. And by practicing playing every endgame out properly, it does put you in a better mindset for when they do count.
Mm, okay.
You don't agree?
No.
I think I wouldn't in a tournament because I think it is important to conserve brain power personally. But I do think online, when it doesn't count, I should be thinking through the end games properly more often than I do.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, there's a case, especially with more complicated endgames that are not the just boring routine out and
Right.
twos that are, you know, if you've been playing for a while, out and twos are like the bread and butter. Like the vast majority of end games are just find the out to win the game.
Right.
Those you don't need to spend time on because honestly, you practice that a lot, even if
Right.
you're not trying to practice it. But other
Yeah.
ones that are a little bit more complicated, whether it's like sticks or like setups or like trying to block and where you have to like block and do some other things, those are maybe a little bit more worthy of being practiced.
That's true. Not all end games are created equal. And if you want to practice your end games, I know Kenji has puzzles on his site.
Yeah, I do. I guess I can,
You could post the link into the chat for our viewers.
if I can find it.
There you go.
Okay, cool. Can
Josh
you
has a
download?
command set up for you. Thank you to Alec for posting that.
Oh,
You know
interesting.
how chess has all those puzzles online of what you do in certain positions? I think it would be great for Scrabble. It's 5-2, Jackson, if we also had puzzles such as endgames or even pre-endgame puzzles.
Yeah, I know that they're at least thinking about that this is on like Google's list in the long run to have puzzles just kind of like Lichess, but it's probably not going to be for a little while. I know that the person who made Godel Escherbot, Todosky, was instrumental in doing that within the chess community. So I think it's just a matter of time before we have more of them. Most of my puzzles are more curated. They're not,
Right.
they're not random. They usually have some sort of overarching theme around them. So
I,
they're more like a book of puzzles, except they're online rather than just random positions like Lichess.
I know on Lichess, a lot of the puzzles are user submitted, right? Like people upload their games that they think have an interesting position, and then uh, if Lichess deems them worthy, they get added to the list. Because I
Yeah, I
think
think so.
I think when you play the puzzles, it says from the game and it lists the two players and their ratings, and then you can go scroll through the entire game. So it's not like they were manufactured artificially; like they're from real games.
Right. Whereas most of mine are definitely artificial. Very few of
Right.
them are from real games.
Which is definitely good for teaching, but in order to get the volume that say Lichess has, being able to upload your own game and saying, "Look, this was such an interesting position," would be a great way to generate content if we could
Right.
figure it out on the tech
I
side.
mean, even with Lichess though, like a human has to go through it. Luckily,
Yeah.
the people who would go through it are on Woogles anyway are going to be able to go through it, which is important. But you need somebody who can also be like, oh well, can you make a case for some other play? Because the play has to be unambiguous, which
Yeah.
is the same thing in chess, but
But I
that
think
is
in
important.
chess it's a bit easier to set up these puzzles than in Scrabble. Like Scrabble computers still have a hard time with Q sticks and other end games that like might take a few turns.
Chess Bunzo says he doesn't think that those are uploaded. Yeah, I don't know that much about the chess algorithm, so I
Oh,
can't.
maybe they're switched from the games. That would make it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean the thing with puzzles is that you want it for Scrabble particularly is you generally don't want the answer to be something that nobody can solve without studying. Like that's the part that makes things a little bit more difficult. Is you generally want fairly common word solutions,
Yeah.
not necessarily super common word, but like something that the vast majority of the public can find. If the solution is, I don't know, tragopan, I think that as a as a medium strength puzzle, that's too difficult because most people don't know what a tragopan is.
But
I
in
just
chess, the puzzles are associated to your rating. Like the better you go, the more difficult it becomes, right?
right, but there's there's kind of a difference between um, there's a difference between difficulty and word knowledge.
Right.
Like you can be really good at finding words consistently, but not have the word knowledge, and then you get a puzzle. Like you get to the point where you find all the quote easy puzzles, and as we can see, uh, they've started. But
Yeah.
yeah, you don't necessarily
Arrhythmia
want.
comes down as a double double bingo. I think we saw Noah play this as a triple triple in the Montreal tournament, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not. I don't know if I remember, but likely.
And look at that. Let's see if people in the chat can unscramble Noah's rack into a 7-letter word. There's 2 that I see.
Worth noting that Noah played perv with the V on the star rather than the E because of the O and Y hooks in addition to the S.
Right.
Making the hooks more dangerous than just putting the P into double space. Even though it didn't work this time, it's generally a good concept.
Yeah, and it shows you how you can get punished in Scrabble even when you've made the right decision. Something that won't happen in a game like chess. So yeah, Chess Funzo and Noah found Slender and Lenders. I don't think Relends is acceptable, but let me check for you. Oh, it is good. So how do you like that? Relend. Slender doesn't take an S. Relended. Wow, I guess relent would be a word, but not relended.
So we're going to see Noah Bingo again next turn. Mack with going to probably take at least 1 turn to balance here. Would like to try to get rid of 3 of those type point tiles instead of, if at all possible. It would be pretty hard to do that. Obviously, it's pretty easy to get rid of 2 of them. And if you're going to keep one, you want to keep the H, because the H is just the strongest one, and it goes decently well with the S.
He could play ab-ohm, though, that unit of measurement, above Slender, I would think, or hooking perv to form pervo.
Yeah, that could definitely be reasonable as well.
So he's looking at foam, I think, which would leave 2 of the tiles. You don't like leaving that B there if you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, the F and the B are clearly the 2 worst. Like, out of those 4 tiles, it definitely goes in order H, M, B, F in terms of their
I agree.
value. So you're definitely be thinking of where H and M are kind of close and B and F are kind of close, but there's a big difference between H and M and B and F. So you're definitely be looking to not keep the B or the F if you could help it.
I mean, you could play fob and pervo or fob and BA if you just wanted to get rid of.
Yeah.
Sham would be a better leave than the other leaves, but is it that good of a leave in order to sacrifice the points of a play like Abom?
I mean, maybe. It's actually pretty close.
I think fob seems like a reasonable play. If you were to play fob, where would you play it? Because I see 3 clear options of where you could play it. Above Slender, hooking perv, or next to the A in the Gripnia.
H and M, you definitely want to be keeping the A and Agrippnia open the majority of the time, so probably not there. You're probably going to want to play it making... out of the other 2 choices, I think it's pretty close. I kind of lean towards the pervo spot, actually, but I don't really have a super strong preference.
My thought would have been above Slender because you're holding the S and then maybe your S can double there.
Yeah, but the S isn't... You're probably not going to play the S that often next turn.
Right, and the position the S would be in isn't really working that well. Like if you were to bingo even, it might not double.
Right.
Mack is taking some time here. We've seen that all day where Noah's played extremely fast. And so he's going to play it there where I was leaning towards.
I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, I think any of them would have been totally fine.
And so Noah's going to bingo.
Yeah, he reaches right for the blank slip. And he's going to find a 9-letter word.
Yep. I do not know whether that's a T or a G. I can't see the slip.
Yeah, I'm going to try and make this full screen and see if I can... I can't tell. Does anyone have better eyes? Oh, it's the second one. Okay. He made it a G.
Okay.
As far as my eyes seem to be telling me.
And he draws awesomely.
Oh, and I have to get these scores updated for everybody. So it is.
Noah's slightly ahead. If just as a rough guess for chat, he's probably up by like 30 or 40, I think.
Okay, I didn't. I did
Maybe
something
like
wrong
30.
here. After Slender, what did Noah play? Noah played.
No, after Slender, Noah played Slender. Mack played Fob.
Oh, I okay. I see my mistake. Sorry about that.
So Mack's gonna play Grams, as in graham crackers,
Nice.
and he's going to now Mack will be up by roughly 40 or 50, I believe.
Sorry, I'm way behind on the Quackle. So it was Perv, and then Agrypnia, and then what was played
Slender.
after Agrypnia? Was it Splendor right away?
Yeah.
Okay.
Noah
Oh, so
played
I have
Perv.
that.
What?
So I have Slender, and then was it
Mack played
Fob?
Fob.
Who played Fob? Mac?
Mack played Fob.
Oh, I think the problem is I just have the scores like for the wrong person. That's the only thing I've done wrong.
Noah played Perv. Mack
Okay,
played
yeah.
Agrypnia.
Okay, so I have everything right. I've just entered Mac and Noah backwards.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah. Okay, so the score now would be 204 for Mac to 157 for Noah. Sorry about that, folks.
All right. Noah plays Goody.
Okay, getting rid of all those ugly vowels that he had, leaving just two of them.
Yep. Mack with a constant heavy rack. He's going to want to get rid of the Z and the X are both good tiles individually, but you don't want to have them together. So you want to get rid of at least one of them.
And he has a great spot for the Z next to the A in Agrypnia. He could play something like Cause, C-O-Z.
Yeah, he could also play Ozolid to the A
Oh
and
yeah,
I.
through the disconnected A and I. That would be super nice.
Noah's going to bingo next turn, almost certainly.
Yeah, that I is gonna stay open.
Yep.
That is a word people might know. I'll put the whole.
I don't know it.
The chat. Yeah, it's not a common one, but maybe people can work it out. It's probably not one I would have known if I hadn't studied it. Okay, so he'll play oxalic instead of ox.
Okay. They're pretty close to identical. In fact, this might even be a little bit better because the Z is just a lot better than the X on this particular
The
board.
thing is, it's not oxalid, it's ozolid, right? It's
right.
Ozolid or oxalic.
Yeah, and C and Z don't necessarily go all that well together either.
There. So leaving DZN, isn't that some sort of online thing?
I don't really know.
No. Okay, so there's the word equident.
I know equidistant.
So we have basically a tie game now, with Mac at 250 and Noah at 248.
Yep.
And
Mack I don't see any great plays from Mack, at least instantly. I mean, he obviously has stuff like just Fez, but yeah, the leave's pretty bad.
The leave is bad, but it scores nicely. He will look to find a better play, but I don't know if he's going to find one.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard to compete with 52 points that Fez is going to score.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just look at stuff like Fund, which is 30, the lead is a lot better. Probably not 22 points worth, but if it were like 16, it would be probably worth it.
Okay, he will take the points. He did at least think it through, which we like to see. Even though it might look like Fez is automatically the best play, you do want to start generating those options like Kenji did with the idea of Fund, getting rid of the U. You could always look to score with the Z on a future turn.
Right. LUND is very unlikely to do anything good on this board. I assume we're going to have a pretty... Well, he did draw the J. And it's actually a pretty... Yeah, I mean, That's actually a pretty good draw, even though, yeah, even though there's not really any good place to play it.
Oh, hey, the Truth Man. Nice to see you. And Josh updates the chat to say that Sid has won the last 2 games, and suddenly that set is very close at 4 games to 3 in Josh's favor, despite the way he wrote that out.
Mack going to be looking to get rid of, at the very least, the J. This isn't exactly, even though it looks a little bit bingo prone, it's actually not. You really need an S pretty desperately to bingo here.
Welcome to the chat, Mod Squad. It does look funny when the board turns, but it doesn't. It's because the camera is moving with the board so that we're always looking at it right side up. So yeah, normally when you have this J, you would like to try and get points with it and build towards something that you might be able to look to bingo with down the road. Both the blanks are gone, and there aren't that many lanes, but that E through Equident is definitely a nice bingo lane.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to just end up with something like Jolt or something that doesn't necessarily feel that good, but I mean, his options aren't great. He wants to keep some sort of leave. The D and U leave isn't great, but at least it goes with the Q and Equident a little bit.
A bit. He's not going to want to go play down too far because then it would give back options for Noah the other way. There are 2 S's left in the blank, not on either player's rack, so they're in the bag.
Right. I don't think that he's going to be too concerned with what Q plays give back because Fobs is already there. So I don't think that's too big of a concern.
True. I mean, it would be starting with an S, but I agree. It's not the biggest concern. Like, to score here, you could consider something like Jet, but he's not going to want to open up Jet being at C3, but it could give a lot back down the second column.
So he does have Jolt lined up.
I like the idea of Jolt, even though it doesn't score too much. He does want to drop that J, and I don't see a better way to do it.
Noah, by the way, is thinking about, because Noah's rack is pretty obvious. Noah's going to play through the Q pretty much no matter what. So he's in this time, he's already thinking about whether he's going to, which Q play he's going to play. So I expect we're going to see Noah play pretty quickly, not because he doesn't see the options, but because he's thinking about them now on max clock.
Right. If he were to play Quay, Quai, he'd look to see there's only 1L left in the bag.
Which is going to get played often.
Yep.
Yeah. You can also play Equip, and you can also play a Quay. I think those are his 3 best plays, and they're all in the same spot.
Yeah. Often you want to hang on to that E, but if you were to play Quip, he could drop the E because he has so many vowels. There's still 5 E's, I believe, left in the bag, and it would score 4 more points.
You would not want to keep the E when your other tiles are AII ever.
Exactly. He has too many vowels, so he would want to drop it. But Quay would also leave nicely with PEIA, and nicely being relative based on the options available to him. There's no way to have a nice leave with anything. With
even though balanced rack, like let's say his rack was like EINT instead, like that isn't that good on this board. Like if there's nowhere to bingo unless you have an S, or unless you draw an S, then keeping like a nice bingo prone leave isn't really nearly as valuable as it usually is.
Yeah, it doesn't. That is a good point, but it is still better than not to have a balanced leave.
Sure.
But you're right. The value of the balanced leave is less than it would be in other situations.
Right. But you're not going to sacrifice, 8 points to keep a balanced leave here. It's just
right.
Whereas in other situations, you definitely would.
So out of those Q options, which one would you pick?
I'd be thinking between a Quay and Equip.
Yeah, I was thinking Quay also.
No, a Quay.
Aquay. Okay. It does score well, and it does get rid of 4 vowels.
Yeah, I care about vowel consonant balance a little bit more than I think most people do in this sort of situation, and I'm willing to keep like the worst individual tiles. Like PII keeps duplicates, and it's not like the best, but at least I'm keeping a better vowel consonant ratio, and IIP does actually do okay on this board. So even though it's going to probably start the worst because IIP is just objectively the worst leave, or it's just not a very good leave, it has pretty low ruin potential and it has a pretty natural spot on C1.
Yeah. Forming if and PE, which is a Hebrew letter.
Right. Whereas with all the other plays, you definitely risk exchanging. He does go with equip. I think that's the other option. I think that's also perfectly fine. You're keeping AIA, so you're keeping 3 vowels and you're keeping 2 A's, which isn't ideal, but A's are on this board are not the worst thing to duplicate, and you're mostly just concerned with not drawing a ton of vowels. And as you can see, Noah drew 4 consonants, so everything worked out okay.
Yeah. If he knew he was drawing 4 consonants, it would have been an easier decision.
Yeah.
So Mack has that UW combination we don't like, but the N helps that combination a bit. If you can find a place, a word like unwed, I haven't taken the chance to look yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the problem with DUNE as a leave in general is, okay, you got a nice balanced rack, and like, you didn't draw that badly, really. You drew a W, and you know WND is not like the worst driver, but what are you doing with it? You're kind of doing nothing.
Yeah, like there aren't that many good spots on the board, to be honest.
Right, it's just gonna play unfed, which
Unfed, yeah. So
makes
that's what I
sense.
was saying about the N really helping that rack, letting you form unwords. But he is going to have to keep that W a bit longer, and I don't see a natural spot for the W
Well,
on the
then
board.
he created a natural spot. The problem is it's a
Oh, that's
natural
true, above the
spot
E.
for everybody. Like that's the place to play for. That's the best place to play on the board now. So I may have actually preferred new a little bit there, just because I don't want to create that spot. Even though it works for me, it's just so good for my opponent's average range that I don't think it's beneficial to you. Maybe
And now Noah could play something like Bond there, BAWN, which will score nicely on this board.
right. He's just not even particularly eager to get rid of like the B. I mean, he may
Because
as
it's a
well.
scoring tile that he could use next turn. He could play something like Wait or Wayne up there and score and still hang on to that B, because it's not looking very bingo friendly for either player at the moment.
Right.
Until one of those S gets drawn.
I mean, he may as well here because the B isn't really that great of a scoring tile on this particular board, so he may as well get rid of it. He's more likely to keep the W, but the W just scores too much in this case. But
Crackle shows Bond to be the highest scoring play by 5 points, but all the highest scoring plays would have been in the same portion of the board there.
yeah.
So I'm going to update the scores for everyone. We have Noah at 360.
Gwyn is going to come down.
And 347 for Mack. Yeah, and he has Gwyn, one of those funny words, Dwine and Gwyn. Gwyn does not take the hooks, whereas Dwine is a verb. So Noah's rack looks more balanced now. He does have the duplicate eased.
Right.
Well, first look for a bingo through the N. That would be your first thought, but I don't think he's going to find one.
He almost has gaieties, almost fits in a variety of ways, but not quite.
It doesn't quite fit. He does have two fun extensions, and it would be extending the word slender. So even though slender didn't take a hook, as in you can't put one tile after it, you can put 3 tiles after it. And with Noah's rack, it might not be the best play, but he has 2 different ways he could do that if he wanted to score. Slenderize and slenderist. But both plays would get rid of that S, and the S is very valuable on this board. because it's hard to score without it. Although after that play of Gwine, there is the scoring spot above the I in Gwine. Are there any tiles left to hit that spot? The K is out. So you do want to consider, in my opinion at least, a K play there could hit you very easily for 30.
I
And
don't
it is
think
a
you
very,
care.
uh, compared to otherwise getting hit for plays about 18 points, I guess. So it's
So the pool matters a lot here. I don't know
okay.
what the pool
Let me
is.
let me add the pool for chat for everyone. So
I
this
mean,
pool will be from Noah's perspective.
okay. Like, for example, if there were a lot of E's, you would consider playing like GIS and Eclipse, because then you could hit Venonate next turn. Uh, there's a lot of like super specific things like that. You need to know how often your opponent's going to bingo frequently. So like GIS is not an option with that pool.
No, looking at the pool, it's not a very bingo friendly pool. There's only one E left, no A's, and the vowels available are O's, U's, and I's.
Right? It's not particularly bad, but it's not great either. Like you because of the vowels, you would not consider something like evening either, because you want to keep the vowels. You don't want AST as a lead anymore because of the pool. So you might even consider something like, I don't know, GST or something like that, and just keep 3 vowels. There are O's. It's not actually that consonant heavy. It's actually not that unbingo friendly either. You
With
do
those
want to.
floaters, the N and the E in Gwine, I guess bingos are definitely possible, and there is that S unseen to Noah. The
Right,
pool is
and
a bit more bingo friendly from Mack's perspective because Noah has so many bingo tiles on his rack.
I mean, the main problem with the pool in general is the fact that there's RST in the pool, LRST. But from Mac's perspective, the only things that are out besides that are T and S, so he's not that concerned. Um,
By the way, that play of evening is through 3 disconnected tiles if people were having trouble seeing it.
yeah, the same place
Um,
as Fen and 8.
yeah,
Um, you know, it, given this pool and given the situation, like you should be thinking a little bit more about scoring than usual.
yeah, I don't think either player's in the position to be just reliant on a bingo.
Right.
The game's basically even as I update the score. Sorry, I'm trying to do a few things at once. So we have Mac ahead by 20, 380 to 360, but it's Noah's turn. So we're looking at a pretty even game at the moment. Yeah, the blank could have been a T or a G. We're pretty sure it was a G, not that it matters anymore. So Noah's going to take a lot of time on this turn. There's no obvious play. He still has a lot of clock, and he's just going to drop the E, which to me looks quite reasonable. Let's look at that pool again, what he can draw.
I mean, he can't draw that much.
No,
He can draw
looking at
something.
the pool, I like it less.
He draws the last E, which is actually pretty relevant.
It's nice for him, especially because it means that Mac won't be able to get that E.
Right. So you can make some plays now that are a little bit more dependent on the E as well. That being said, GIS would have worked out, but there's no way to know that.
Okay, so this is the pool from Mac's perspective, so it's going to look a bit different.
Mac's gonna definitely want to block, but he's not a lot of great ways to do it with this particular rack. He could play it like his best blocking option is probably also to leave like it's something like V's, because he still needs to get rid of the V pretty much at all costs here. He needs to outrun.
He does want to outrun. He's got a very slight lead, and it is his turn.
But like he can't do something like Vin. Like it's just not gonna work.
No, it doesn't score enough, and he could still get a bingo on him after that.
Right. So at least Viols probably is gonna outrun in actuality if Noah doesn't bingo, which matters a lot. He could also play hooking irritators, but it's really hard to get rid of this V and do much. You can play Volted, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, it would only score 8, 12, 14. So the outrun aspect of that isn't looking great. If
It's
he,
okay. I mean, 14 is 14. You have the S for equips.
it looks like Vidiots and Fobs could score.
It's not that much more.
No, and it drops that S. You also want to be considering how many you're going to be leaving in the bag. So right now there are 8 tiles in the bag.
Right.
So Vidiots would score 23 and play 6 of those 8, leaving 2 in the bag, leaving Noah a chance to fish 1.
Well, Noah might just stop fishing. The problem is if you play the S off here as well, like
You could draw
you're
into
gonna have to
clip.
worry about setups that are like stuff like neg is gonna come down from Noah a decent percentage of the time. Dealing with that is pretty difficult.
Yeah, that's a
Assuming that
good
there's
point.
no big scoring play that happens with equips immediately. So because of that, like there is some value in keeping the S here as well.
And I definitely wouldn't be looking to play 6 tiles like I had suggested, because if you draw poorly, then it's pretty much game over right away. You know Noah just played off 1. He's probably looking a lot more balanced. And
Right, although the pool is balanced, so if Noah's rack is balanced and the pool is balanced, then you're probably going to actually draw a pretty balanced rack yourself.
that's a good way of looking at it. Mack has the V in his hand. He knows he wants to play it, and I think he's going to go with your suggestion of Voltu.
I think that seems reasonable.
Leaving IS with that pool is looking promising. Well, there are 2 eyes unseen.
Yeah, I mean, I expect that Mack will draw something balanced, albeit without an E, which we'll see if that becomes a problem. It very well could.
So it's not the best draw from Mack's perspective, picking up IOUM, I believe.
Yep.
Was the draw. So his vowels aren't looking too nice at this point.
So there's 3 in the bag, I believe.
Yeah, there's 3 in the bag. I'll post the whole pool for everybody.
Noah has 8 minutes. He should be spending probably about 5 of those minutes now. Like he needs to be spending a good amount of time thinking about what can happen here.
Yeah, so he's looking, and he can very quickly see that no bingos are going to be coming down from Mac with that pool, unless miscook. Can you miscook something?
Think so?
Yeah, so that I guess would be the one possible bingo that I could see from that pool.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of scoring options he needs to be wary of.
Absolutely, especially the CK combination, and S is out, that M. But there's also possibilities for Mac to have a very poor rack with that pool. He did just draw 5. There are all those ugly vowels. If he's too far heavy with either vowels or consonants, he could have a rack like he has now.
I mean, his rack now isn't even that bad, though.
It's like, not terrible, but it's not ideal.
I mean, Nimius is going to come down. That's going to score a lot.
Okay, I didn't see Nimius. Yeah, that.
Like, I mean, there's other plays too that are he has to leave 1 in the bag. It's gonna be pretty surprised when he draws when he draws CK out of the bag. Nimius has to be the right play, Delano, because I would be, unless there's something else that is even better than that, which there might be, but what else is there? Like,
I don't see anything else that could approach that. That scores 33.
And he's going to get to go out too.
And going to go out into it, it leaves an R. An R plus any tile should be able to go out.
Maybe. I have not reached that conclusion yet, but likely
I mean,
so.
Well, I mean, he only has a minute and a half, but that's the sort of thing he should be looking at.
Yeah, no, that is what you should be looking at. I need to take my minute and a half to come to conclusions like that. Does
It
it have
wasn't a
two spots?
conclusion. It was
Okay.
a thought. It's hard when you're doing a few things at once and going back between each player's perspective, and you're just trying to.
Right. Does
So
he outrun Casket? If like, is he gonna outrun Casket if he draws most of these things? I think so, but I haven't calculated
oh, I
that yet.
haven't updated the score either. Sorry again. 390. He's up 4 points by my hopefully accurate scorekeeping after that early blunder.
Oh, he's only at 4. So Casket's going to score 28, 30, 45. Nimius would score 31.
It scores 33.
Or 33, yeah. Does it score 33? Yeah, okay. So he has to go out and score like 6. Okay, he should be able to do that.
Yeah.
He's good.
I guess Noah played fast Jackson in order to try and put Mack under time pressure.
But Mack knows that either Casket or Gasket is probably coming down here.
Right.
Like the majority of the time. And OR is going to score just enough, I think. I mean, it is the consideration, Jalamokas, but let's be honest, like, he has to play it anyway, even if that is a threat. Like, even if there's like a bingo in the bag, like, there's no way he's gonna win more than 6 or 7 out of 8 end games by not doing that.
And Mack has pulled it out with 16 seconds to spare, 9 points. Congratulations to Mack, the champion of the Midwest Matchplay Showdown.
Yes, congratulations.
He came in as the heavy favorite, and he won all 3 sets, 6 games to 2. So
I don't know if he's a heavy favorite.
well, the favorite.
Yeah, probably. Maybe.
He was saying he felt a bit rusty, whereas Noah's been playing a bunch of tournaments lately.
Right.
But I think most people would
yeah.
have had Mack as the favorite.
Yeah, I would say favorite, but I don't think he has like the majority. If they were betting, like, I don't think he's even odds. I think he's worse than even odds in terms of he's a plurality favorite.
Right. It would have been close on the plurality favorite. I think I might have still taken Mack over the field, but maybe that's just me. Okay. What do people in the chat think?
Hello, Mac Mommy 589.
Welcome, and if you are indeed Mack's mom, congratulations to your son on a big victory and $600 going his way. So I believe the other set was at 4 games to 3 in Josh's favor when we last heard from them.
I believe so.
Alec had Noah as the favorite. Okay, that's fair. I think very highly of Noah's abilities, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable position to take.
It basically comes down to how much you think Mack has been playing lately.
Right.
Because like if Mack has been playing a lot, then maybe. I mean, it's the same thing with most tournaments. I mean, we've just gone through COVID, so most of these sorts of quote calculations basically depend on what have people been doing during COVID.
Right. Yeah, people can come out of COVID a lot stronger or a lot weaker.
Right. Like,
if Mack doesn't play much online, then maybe he's a candidate to come out a lot weaker.
Maybe. Yeah.
Oh, Josh says they're recounting the game here, but it looks like Mack has won this one by 9 from my quackling.
Right. But yeah, I think it's somebody next nationals tournament. I sincerely, strongly believe there's going to be some random 17 or 1800 player, somebody who's like the 70th seed who finishes in the top 5 because they've just been like, oh, it's COVID, time to study a ton of words, and they're going to be underrated by like a gigantic number of points.
But to go from underrated to being top 5,
completely doable. Completely doable.
It is doable, but it'll be impressive if somebody can do such a leap. I agree. We will see people rising up, and we'll see people falling back. But
Yeah.
I know I studied a lot earlier in COVID, and then nothing was happening. I kind of got bored of studying because it didn't feel like there was anything to study for.
Right.
Um,
I think everybody's kind of going through that process too. You're kind of like playing the game of like, oh, when are tournaments going to reopen? Because
right.
you don't want to do it too early in the process, but like, and just anytime it looks like it's going to be over, then something else happens. Like it looked like 3 months ago it was going to be fine, and then the Omicron thing happened, and who knows what's going to
Yeah.
happen in 3 months, and then
Well,
yeah, all these things not just related to between COVID and various other uncertainties coming within the Scrabble community. There's going to there's a lot of different things that can happen.
absolutely. And I see Josh mentioning that they're going to take a small break before him and Sid come on to, I guess, finish their match. So I guess Sid agreed to that. I know it's good practice to play on stream.
Yeah, it definitely can be.
I know even playing as a guest on Josh's stream, I feel like is decent practice, even though it's just very casual woggles. It's not the same as playing over the board, but just knowing that people are watching and making plays while you know you're being judged stops you from making lazy plays and tries to at least force you into thinking things through.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can become harder because people are a little bit they become a little bit less brave on stream, I think, because they're a little less willing to try things that could get them criticized.
Right, not me. I've lost more challenges on stream than anybody I know. So, but I'd
Tell me
agree.
you.
Most people do pull back.
Yeah.
I think online, especially, it's good to sort of try words you're not sure of. If they get challenged off, hopefully it'll help you remember them a bit better.
Right.
But not everybody's going to think that way.
Well, I mean, online is kind of like a source of the game is different in certain ways. In some ways, it's similar, and in some ways, it's different. It's kind of like offline versus online on like a video game, for example. Like I would imagine that those are also different. You get certain. You know exactly what's happening on person. Like if somebody takes 5 minutes to make a play online, it could mean anything. It could mean that their
They went to the
cat,
bathroom.
right, or their cat or did something, or it could mean that they've been
Right.
thinking for 5 minutes straight. Like you have no idea, and tendencies can be different, etc., etc. So there are some key differences that somebody could just be bad because they're not used to the interface. The same
Right.
thing happens live too. Like people who are mostly online.
It's a lot harder
Online
for me to see
warriors.
over the board because I play way more often online. I absolutely agree with that.
Right. Like whenever I play a tournament in real life, I usually have to take a few weeks and start forcing playing games online. And what I do is I have a tile bag and I actually play the game on a board because I'm not used
Right.
to the interface, the live interface, as opposed to
Yeah.
the online interface that I'm used to.
And just
So,
practicing tracking and scorekeeping. For you, it might come easy. For me, I find that's one of the biggest adjustments to playing live.
oh no, I've practiced that as well. Like I intentionally retrack. I practice retracking a lot,
Yeah,
where I just like
that's
have like
something I
2/3
should
of the board.
practice because often late in the game you notice you're one or two tiles off in your tracking, and then you got to quickly figure out which tile it is. And if you've practiced that, and you might have some sort of algorithm or strategy for figuring out, um, maybe it's the R's, maybe I don't know how you would go about doing
I just
that.
do the whole board. I just
Yeah,
like it's like two tiles off. I ain't gonna figure this out. The first thing you do is you try to be like, okay, can I figure this out in 10 seconds? And if the answer is
right.
no, then you're just like, fuck it, and then I have
You
the
have to do
whole
the whole
retracking,
thing.
and it
Yeah.
takes like 2 minutes roughly. But I know it's gonna take 2 minutes, and I know it's pretty consistent because I've practiced doing it a lot.
So do you just go like row by row, like row one, and you just start crossing off letters
I
that
do
way?
column by column, but
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
It's good to know it takes approximately 2 minutes. You're right. Sometimes you can look at your sheet and you realize very quickly, oh, I didn't cross off FOB, FOB. and you're able to see you just missed one specific word. But other times, you might have crossed off a letter that was already on the board, like when you play through a letter,
Right.
and so you cross off the I in equident, but it was already on the board. You shouldn't have crossed it off, and that's a harder mistake to find when you're just quickly trying to figure out where you went wrong.
A lot of times you can just do it on your opponent's clock as well. Like when most turns in Scrabble, you don't need the exact pool
Right.
before like the pre-end game. So like if you know like, oh well, I'm one or two tiles off, you still see like you still have enough information to usually make informations about fishing or like or like
Absolutely.
vowel consonant balance or things like that. So you can just be like, okay, I'm one or two tiles off. I can still make my play and then draw my tile, and then immediately after making my play and draw my tile, then I go into the 2-minute retracking mode.
Right.
And usually if my opponent does something, makes the play before I'm done, but usually it's harder to see on my opponent's time anyway because the board is upside down. So at that point, they take a minute and a half to make their play, I take 30 seconds, and then I'm done tracking, and then I'm just be like, okay, this is where I am, and it's not such a big deal.
Yeah, like I find a lot of people when it's their opponent's clock, sometimes they'll just sort of zone off into space for a minute here and there. Um, and it's a good time to be checking to see if your tracking's accurate, checking to see the vowel consonant ratio, checking to see to make sure you haven't missed carrying the one in any sort of score thing. There's maybe writing down some hooks that you've noticed that might come up later in the game, or just there's a lot of different things you can do with that clock, even when you feel like you don't, like you might be looking at a rack where you might think your next turn is obvious, but if you had used that time earlier in the game to maybe think about some of these things, then later when you're in the time crunch, you might have already factored for that.
Right. A pretty large portion of over the board play, I think, is understanding what you can do or what you're better off doing on your clock and what you're better off doing on your opponent's clock. Because for literally half of the game, the board is upside down.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but for me anyway, I can only do so much when the board is upside down.
I also find it hard when it's upside down. I used to play a lot against Jim Nanavati, who likes to play with it upside down. So the whole game, the board was facing me, which I rather enjoyed, although it wasn't good practice. I see a question in the chat. Let's answer that. Chess Bunzo is asking what you're allowed to write down during a game, and you can write down pretty much anything.
You can write down anything as long as after the game is started. You cannot have things written down in front of you before the game starts.
Yeah, you can't have like a list of words, but you will have a score sheet that will let you cross off each letter that's been played. It'll let you write down the words that have been played, the total score, stuff like that. But once the game's going, you can start writing down anything that'll trigger your memory. Maybe you have some little mnemonics you want to write down. Maybe you want to write out the letters on your rack to see if that'll help spell out a word for you. Try out different permutations. You can write out a word, see if it looks right.
Yeah, no, in chess you can't write down anything. In most games you cannot write down anything, but Scrabble is different because of the fact that it's a word game, so it's oftentimes imperative for a lot of different reasons.
You'll see a lot of people write down their rack plus one of the floaters on the board. So they'll have 7 tiles on their rack plus an 8th tile they can either bingo to, from, or through. And they'll see if those 8 letters written out in order, alphabetic order, looks like a word that they've maybe studied. The problem is some players only write out these alphagrams, as we call them, when they're close to bingoing. So it gives away a lot of information to their opponent. If you're only writing out a sort of 8-letter rack 2 or 3 times a game, you're sort of telegraphing to your opponent more often than not that these are the racks where you're close to bingoing, and then your opponent can adjust accordingly.
Right. A lot of people at higher levels, for that reason, only start writing racks on their own time rather than their opponent's time.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. And then the other thing you have to consider is some people will try and psych you out, whether it's allowed or not. They'll maybe write out some different alphagrams when they know they're going to exchange the next turn. And
I think that's perfectly legit.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I think you can shuffle your tiles really hard while you know you're exchanging. Just even like something to do with your hands. Try and make your opponent think you have a blank, maybe, when you know you have six eyes and a U.
I mean, there's only so many things you can really do, even if you know, like, even if you have like really reliable information about your opponent. Like, if you know that your opponent's close to a bingo and they're writing out alphograms, how much can you really do about it? Is
Well, it
part of the
depends on the
thing.
board. Is there one lane? Is there four lanes? Like,
Well, if there's one lane and your opponent fished and is trying to bingo, they're being an idiot. But
yeah, no, I know, but I mean, there are times where you're considering between a play that's more defensive, more
sure,
blocking, and plays that are more offensive. And if you've got a read on them and you think that they're close to a bingo, you're probably then going to pick the play that's more defensive.
sure.
Um, and I find a lot of players are like that, where they're only writing out their racks when they feel like they have a chance to bingo. People don't tend to write out 4 or 5 letter rack, like 4 or 5 tiles, because those are easier to anagram maybe in your head. Whereas when it gets longer, you like to have that written frame of reference.
Yeah.
So Josh had mentioned that they were just finishing their last half of the game, and then they'll switch over here. Josh was up 4 games to 3. If he wins that one, then it'll become sudden death for Sid.
That does make sense. I mean, I don't know how they're probably pretty close to done at this point. I mean, you can see Sid and Josh in the background still, like, they're still thinking, obviously.
Yeah, it looks like maybe they're in the last portion of the game.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there are some in-person things that you can do. I mean, I'm somebody who does this a little bit more than other people because I'm probably adjust to different players more than others do.
Right.
Uh, Basically, that being said, I mean, there's only so much you can do against most people. Like all of the adjusting is at the end of the day, if you outdraw somebody, you're still going to win, and if you get outdrawn badly, you're still going to lose. You're mostly fighting for at most 10% equity per game,
I
and
agree.
you are
Most of the time, you're going to make the same play regardless of the opponent. You can get lost in the metagame and actually overcompensate,
sure,
and that can cost you too.
sure. Or you could
Um,
or you could compensate correctly, and then it won't work,
yeah,
and then everybody will tell you that you're overcompensating.
right. Like Kenji's probably one of the more notable players for thinking about those meta things, but clearly it's worked out quite well for him over the years. I think as a disciple of Jackson, who's the one who first sort of taught me strategy, I would fall under that same Kenji tree, even if I don't think I play it the same way as them. But I've definitely been taught many of the same sort of strategies, and I think there's so much validity to them.
Yeah, it just the thing is, if you do something that's off, that's a bit different than what conventional theory is, like, your reasons have to be right. Like,
Right.
and you're gonna get yelled at a lot. Like, people will not like what you're doing if they don't, and if you don't understand it, or if sometimes you're gonna not be considering something, or it complicates the game. A lot of what I do is complicating the game. Complicating the game is the point of complicating the game is to make your opponents make mistakes. But the point of complicating the game also means that you could make more mistakes because you're
Absolutely.
complicating the game.
I think people tell me I'm hard to read behind the board, which I take as a compliment. You definitely don't want to be too emotive at the board if you can help it. I
Right.
think it can definitely give away a lot when you wear your emotions on your sleeve.
Right.
But you can go against Scrabble theory. Sid in the background would be a great example of that. I was saying how maybe I fall under your tree of teaching, whereas Sid definitely learned from the late David Gibson. And he
Admittedly
plays
pretty different, but yeah.
very different. And it's impressive in a game like Scrabble where so many players are playing a similar sort of strategy, kind of following the Quackle approach, which is our computer program. And then Sid often plays a very different style, and in a vacuum, the plays often don't look like the plays I would ever consider. And yet, we saw how David used such a strategy. Uh, I think Sid will be the first to say that he hasn't gotten to David's level, but David was able to use that strategy to get to the very top of the NWL standings.
The thing about defensive strategies in general is, especially for like adapting to them, is that almost every defensive strategy is different. So there are a
Right.
lot of different uh, there are a lot of different variations of like hyper defensive strategies that people try, but like it's hard to compartmentalize them because they're not the same.
No.
So like most people who play like open styles, they play pretty similar to each other. So like
Right.
you get a pretty uh, you can use pretty much the same exact counter strategy for all of them, and it'll mostly work out because they just play too similarly. Like you don't need to make micro adjustments so much. Whereas you play against defensive strategies, you need to micro adjust a little bit more because the way that Sid plays is different than the way that Gibson plays, which is different than the way then let's say Adam Logan plays, or
Okay.
or Jim Cramer, or other notable experts who take these sorts of strategies. They have different nuances to how they think about them and what exactly they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think uh, a lot of you can get a lot of information even just on someone's age often, like and how long they've been playing the game. I find a lot of the older players have pretty good word knowledge. They like to leave very bingo heavy racks, whether it's the time of the game to leave bingo heavy racks, perhaps. Um, and a lot seem to they bingo a lot. And having played a lot against, let's say, HastyBot, a computer program that bingos a lot, it's hard to beat these programs. So the scoring never stops, as people say, and uh, I think the humans have a hard time with this really high scoring sort of approach.
Well,
So
you want to be able to limit it to some degree. Like, you need some sort of. It's difficult to a large
yeah,
degree, and if at some point, there's kind of the evolutionary question of if people play optimally, what will the board look like?
right.
And it's a difficult question to answer just in general, regardless of what dictionary you're playing or what the specific parameters are, or whether people have perfect word knowledge. And as you add more words, I think it's pretty clear that the game becomes more quote open, where there's
Open.
just more options in the
Yeah, you can't
there's
close
just more
things
options in
down
the early game.
because there's just so many more hooks and ways to open the board, like in a bingo
Right.
dictionary.
So over time, especially 20 years ago, the dictionary was even NWL. The dictionary was 70% of its size.
Okay.
So back in 1980 or whenever tournament Scrabble started, uh, the way that you were supposed to play in 1980 is different than the way you're supposed to play in 2021. It's different, and some
They
people
also
don't.
didn't have the computer programs back then to know how to um, play sort of optimally.
Right.
But
I mean,
but if they did, they still would have been led to a different strategy. Um,
likely, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, computer programs are very limited in what they can do. Um, but what you can do against computer programs is very dependent on all sorts of things that it, it requires a level of precision.
Right. The
If
computer program
somebody,
assumes the other player is going to play the way it would, which is finding all the words, never phoning, never making a mistake, not doing as many setups or other things that a human player might sort of do.
right,
And that's often not factored in when people take the analysis because often people will say, well, a blank's worth 40 points, for example. And maybe somebody analyzed that to determine that, but that would be assuming everybody's playing perfectly. Um, because that's where these calculations sort of seem to come from, at least from my understanding.
I mean, they don't necessarily make that sort of assumption. They're not that complicated of programs, but
Right.
they're not. They're basically just calculators.
So what is the future of Scrabble programs? Is there something
Well,
coming
it's
down the
Macondo.
road?
It, it's
Macondo.
it's what Cesar and uh, Jesse Day are doing, but
So it's
it's gonna
gonna
take a
work
while.
sort of similar to Quackle,
No, it'll work pretty differently.
but differently. Okay.
You can kind of think of it like a more basic version of AlphaGo.
Okay. I watched that documentary. It was quite fascinating for people who haven't seen it.
I mean, you can think of Scrabble in terms of there are ways to update even Monte Carlo simulations. So you can think of Scrabble as having a distribution for every turn based on the board, the board, your tiles, your opponent's last play, etc., etc. You can think of it as having like a distribution of possible scores, and it has a shape, and it's double hump because of the bingos. So obviously, you can think of it like a bell curve with a smaller bell curve at the end because of bingos.
For the bingos, okay.
Um, and then because of that distribution, you can then start doing Monte Carlo simulations based on that like double hump distribution. Um,
Uh, for us who don't know what a Monte Carlo simulation is, could you
so
define it?
yeah, so basically what you can do is what a computer does when it does analysis, not when it's just playing normally, because then it doesn't do anything. It just calculates points and leave and plays. Is it goes through and it makes a play, and then it draws randomly and then makes plays according to a very sub algorithm, and it does it thousands or tens of thousands or millions of times, however many times you want
Okay.
to run the simulation. Um, and then it makes assumptions at the end of, and it does it for a certain number of plays. So it might do that for, let's say on turn one, it does it for turn one, turn two, turn three, turn four, and then it ends.
Yeah.
And then it makes assumptions about what happens at the end of turn four. It makes some sort of valuation metric, which is pretty flawed in a lot of ways. When we
Okay.
look at the problem with simulations, it usually comes down to the idea that, well, what do you do at the end of the simulation? How does that work? And there's not really any good way of answering that, because you're basically just delaying the problem. So in most cases, you don't know what it should be doing on turn one, so you run a simulation, and it just turns out that now you're delaying, so the computer doesn't know what it's doing in turn three.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Um, so in a lot of cases, you get simulations that aren't really all that accurate. But if you get simulations, if you start creating more accurate algorithms, both for the simulation itself and for what happens at the end of the simulation, then you could get a lot better results.
So is the Macondo program going to be considering what people played on the previous turns? Like trying to
Probably.
evaluate what the strength of their leave would be, for example?
I mean, we could do that now pretty easily. Like even
But Quackle doesn't, right? Like Quackle doesn't consider if you played off one the turn before.
ironically, it doesn't, because I told them not to do it,
Oh,
which is the irony of this entire
so it's
situation.
your
But
fault.
yes, um,
Because that would seem like when we're doing human analysis, we definitely consider, oh, he just played off one, he's probably close to a bingo, and I might need to adjust.
right. The problem is that computers do it, like, to do that easily is to do it badly.
True.
Like
Yeah.
the, the, most people, when they do range finding, for whatever reason, and I really haven't figured this out yet entirely, they do positively finding pretty well. Like they're like, oh, somebody is close to a bingo, or oh, somebody has a bad rack, or like somebody is like extremely foul heavy, and then they stop.
Right. But
Very
they don't
few.
stop to think like, oh, they might definitely not have a J, or they almost certainly have another L or something like that.
Right, and they only do things like obvious, like, oh, well, if they had an S, they would have made this play that scored 20 more points. You can do a lot more in theory.
Yeah.
But the problem is that when you do more in theory, people are going to complain because they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
That's always going to happen. B, if you try to do anything that's too advanced, like you're going to be right X percent of the time, but where X is not 100 or even close to 100.
Okay.
So like there's a lot of times when you make an analysis of, well, somebody probably doesn't have an S.
Right.
And the key is the word probably. So people are just like, oh, well, you were probably and you were wrong. And I'm like, well, that's why I use the word probably.
But that's what makes Scrabble analysis so tough, is that
Right.
that word probably is always there until you're in the end game.
Right.
But AlphaGo also, I think, would have that word probably, or just the game Go would have that word probably, wouldn't it?
I mean,
Um,
in those cases, they have a modal engine. They have something that actually quote thinks. So what those programs do ultimately is they run really, 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 really long simulations, and they try to use various machine learning techniques to quote learn
okay.
what to do within certain situations.
So my
Which is
question would be, is that going to be applied to Scrabble?
that's the hope, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Because
Is anyone working on that?
yes. So
Oh,
Cesar
good.
and Jesse Day are both working on that.
Is that part of Macondo, or is that another separate thing they have
No,
taken on?
it's part of Macondo.
Okay. Yeah, huge props to them for all the work they've done for the Scrabble community.
Right. But it's
Wiggles
going to take some
is,
years. It's
yeah,
probably going
yeah.
to be
I was
it,
already asking when the puzzles are coming, now when the
right. This is
this
probably
is
2023, I would guess. This isn't
okay.
something that because not only is there are things that they need to do first, and not only is that, but this takes a long time to do. It does
Yeah, it
not.
sounds extremely complicated. The advancements they've made on Wiggles in just a year is already quite impressive.
Right.
It feels like every few weeks there's another big change that's making it either, even if it's not necessarily for big deep analysis, like just being able to match people and set a bottom limit was a nice change for people who didn't want to put a seek out if they had to play someone who was new to the game and wasn't likely to finish the game.
Yeah.
Um, like that was a bigger deal to a lot of players than maybe this high level analysis. Uh,
Oh, right. I don't think most people care, which is.
no, but I mean, they might not care, and maybe that's to people's advantage who do care. Like, um, lots of players are very highly rated and might not know how to use Quackle.
Most people are. There are lots of people who do very well in over the board Scrabble who do not understand even the basics of how Quackle works or care.
Right.
Um, you know, Gibson and Joel Sherman and some other people, they could not be bothered to understand in the slightest way how Quackle even works.
And they both won the North American Championship,
They
and
have.
Joel won the World Championship. So um, clearly, they've succeeded despite that
Yeah.
limitation.
So there's only so much value really, and you know, you you can get very, very, very far without knowing how all of these sorts of things may work.
Right.
Tarosky mentioning it's curious that equity is one-dimensional as opposed to good for bingo, good for heavy score, etc. I mean, it's just like in chess, where the way that humans think about Scrabble positions may not necessarily be the best thing, but we need to figure out. We can't just look at each position for its individual merits. We have to figure out different heuristics as to how to analyze positions. So computers are worse in some ways because they can't use those sorts of algorithms, but they're better in some ways because they're not restrained by the limitations of those heuristics. So, even though we have to think about, well, what's good for the position, just like in chess, in Scrabble, you think about what's good for the position, what's good for the future range, etc., etc.